Hi, everybody. Today's Wednesday, October 22nd, 2025. And our dear friend, nosso amigo, Pepe Escobar is here.
I'm here just because of you, Nima. So, greetings from Southeast Asia to you, Nima, and to our audience.
Yeah. Pepe, let's get started with one of the main questions right now when we look at the Middle East, which is the situation between Iran and Israel. In your opinion, I ask my audience, our audience here, that is a new cycle of war between Iran and Israel brewing in the Middle East? What's your take on that?
Well, I prefer to start relaying what I heard from connections in Iran, and one of them who relayed to me something from a very high level IRGC source. They are ready for war. And essentially, they said that most of the commanders, if not all of them, with a few exceptions, they have public meetings, etc. They are in their bunkers, concentrated on the possibility of war. One of the terms that they used was war conditions. I don't know if this is a direct translation from Farsi. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But I interpret it as they are analyzing everything around in West Asia, signs coming from Washington, etc., and they consider that the possibility of an attack is very, very high, which is something extremely worrying for all of us and for the global South as a whole. Um, Something parallel to that. Uh, I didn't say that before openly because I was waiting for the confirmation. I was ready to go to a very important conference in Iran next week, beginning of next week, about US Iran relations, essentially. This weekend, we heard from the organizers that the conference was canceled. And guess what? The reason was once again war conditions. So this is very, very serious. I cannot name the organization that is responsible for this conference. I can only say that it's one of the top organizations of the Iranian system. So for them to cancel a conference, bringing foreign guests like us, which would be excellent from their point of view to have foreigners in Iran right now at the moment relaying the Iranian point of view to the outside world and especially to the global South, to cancel that at the last minute, literally. I had already made my visa application. I was already waiting for the confirmation of the visa. And, all that in the last minute is not a good sign. This means that they are very, very worried. And something parallel to that it's on a more, not light, but at least not so hardcore vein. Press TV had announced that they were starting to broadcast the documentary that we shot last May in Iran, which they titled Golden Corridor. It's a very nice title, in fact. This is basically myself and a crew of 5 Iranians, excellent professionals and wonderful people. We crossed Iran from the Caspian Sea to the Persian Gulf and traveling from Tehran to Qom and Isfahan as well, and then to Chabahar, the port in the Sea of Oman, very, very important. And even illegally, I crossed the Iran-Pakistan border illegally, but on a fishing boat. So nobody can say anything, right? So this is the first documentary and basically conducted by a foreigner, which is an enormous honor in my case, about the International North-South Transportation Corridor, which our audience, all of you know, is a BRICS project. Russia, Iran, and India. So now we still don't know when. It's up to Press TV. They're going to reorganize the dates, and I'll keep you all informed. And I ask them, please get a link So anyone, anywhere in the world can access and see the documentary because many people won't be able to follow the broadcasts live on Press TV. So this is the lighter side of it. As you see these past few days, everything was turned upside down in Tehran, and that's a sign that they are taking all the signs that they are receiving very, very seriously.
We know what has happened with the case of JCPOA, and Russia,
Mhm.
Iran, China came together to, to unify their position toward what the
Yes,
West is doing. How do you find the situation among these three countries when it comes to, because we've learned also that Russia has provided Iran with MiG-29, the latest version, Su-35, and
yes. Not to
what
mention
is
the Chinese, what the Chinese are not saying, Nima, which is even better. The Chinese are providing Iran with, it's what I heard in Beijing a little over a month ago, but for the moment, this is absolutely off the record. But the Chinese are helping as well.
and how far this sort of security partnership goes in your opinion among these three countries?
Well, in a theory, Nima, you know that they all have strategic partnerships, interlocking strategic partnerships, right? This does not necessarily mean, like it happened last time with the 12-day war launched by Israel with American help against Iran, that Russia and China will be on the front lines in Iran helping Iran. It's a completely different story. There is diplomatic support, of course. There is the interactions inside BRICS and inside SCO. They're all important members, the top members, we can say, in many aspects. But of course, there is what is underground, like what Russia is supposed. There are a lot of Antonov flights these past few weeks from Moscow to Tehran. So we can imagine that they are delivering some serious hardware. And the Chinese, of course, they are way more circumspect, and they don't even say anything explicitly about how they are helping Iran. But in terms of the JCPOA, we could see that the diplomatic support was instantaneous because both Russia and China, which were part of the negotiations in Vienna 10 years ago, and of course, they are signatories of the JCPOA, even before JCPOA went to the UN. I remember very well, especially the Russians in Vienna 10 years ago. Lavrov was a very, very important actor discussing with those stupid Europeans, but especially with John Kerry. And Lavrov and John Kerry, at least they had a mutual respect relationship. That helped a lot. So immediately, Russia and China stated the obvious. Look, because once again of those warmongering Europeans, the JCPOA, as it existed for the past 10 years, is now dead for all practical purposes. So Iran doesn't have to follow anything anymore. And these idiots reinstated the snapback sanctions. Obviously, this was an European American plot against Russia and China. So, once again, how can you possibly have any sort of adult discussion with this so called European political elites? We only see increments of existing wars, hybrid war, hot war, or forever war ahead of them. And of course, different levels when it comes to Russia, China, and Iran. Russia at the top in terms of forever war, Iran right below it, and China below it, especially because the Europeans need what China produces. They cannot live without it. But their mindset is, I would not even qualify it as retrograde. It's bordering, no, it's frankly psychopathic and imbecilic psychopathic, in fact. And they keep antagonizing the top members of the global south, the global majority, BRICS, SCO, action after action after action. In fact, it's not even action from their part, it's reaction to their own stupidity. And because they set a course that is absolutely misguided from the beginning, they cannot change course. So their inimical relationship with what they call the regime in Tehran is more or less on the same level with their inimical relationship with what they call the dictatorship in Russia. It doesn't change. Or, okay, some Europeans are slightly more educated than Americans, but the same would apply to the red communist China. It's the same thing. So this clash between the old world of NATO Stan, essentially, and the Atlanticist West against BRICS, SCO, and the top members of the Global South. So every important instance that we have geopolitically is renewed over and over again. So it's for all of us, it's a source of despair because we already know what's going to happen even before it happens. Everybody knew that these idiots would reinstate the snapback sanctions months before it happened. Everybody knew it. And nobody was capable of instilling some sort of a sense into these stupid leaderships. And I said, look, you are once again alienating the absolute majority of the Global South. And of course, if I remember correctly, all the members of the non-aligned movement, 120 something, they also condemned the reinstating the snapback sanctions. So once again, we have three European powers. You cannot call them powers, no? This trash bin of history kind of stuff, plus the Americans antagonizing the absolute majority, the global majority. What else is new, Nima?
You know what's so tragic about Europe? Europe going in the same direction in terms of their foreign policy, going to the same direction as Israel went. Israel
Yes,
has nobody but the United States. And those countries who have some sort of relationship with Israel is because of the United States.
exactly.
And and Europe is going in that direction, Pepe. You don't see they don't have independent foreign policy. I don't know how long does it take, because if they become fully dependent on the United States, that would, the moment would come to the public opinion in the United. Why do we need to support Europe? Because if Europe become dependent in terms of energy, oil, gas, and they're not going to be able to afford it because of the price of the US. So after all, it's going to be liability for the United States. That's going to change that the same position that Israel is in right now. I don't know if they see the sort of threat they're bringing to themselves.
No, they don't, Nima. The short answer to your question, they don't. First of all, because their own inner mediocrity. The fact that most of them, their popularity rates are beyond appalling, and they know that they have to stick to something, otherwise they are going to be brought down. And we could even get to a pitchfork scenario, or having Madame Guillotine have a conversation with many of them, if not all of them. The exceptions are, of course, some Eastern Europeans who are on the margins. Like in the case of Hungary, not exactly on the margins. Hungary is probably the number one opponent of Brussels stupidity. And at least Orban says that openly. And everybody knows it in Western Europe, in Eastern Europe, and beyond. Slovakia as well. Some movements by Austria as well. So there is opposition against Brussels Kafkaesque stupidity, let's put it this way. But nothing will change the course that they set years ago, if not decades ago. When we look at those harpies at the head of the European Commission, and when we look especially at that stupid Dutchman, Stale Good, as the Secretary General of NATO, when you put these all together, not only there is stupidity, but their total misreading of the current geopolitical situation in Europe, in the West, and around the world. And on top of it, the vassalization process. Everything is happening as Europe is being vassalized to a point of no return by the Americans. And the Trump 2.0 leadership, let's put it this way, plus the absolute majority of Republicans, they despise Europe as allies and as vassals. They have less than zero importance on anything. They are not even allowed to sit at the dog's table right beside the big banquet where the real powers sit, And they brought this on themselves. And obviously, because they brought them on themselves, they have no self-critical instincts to analyze what they did to themselves. It's impossible, absolutely impossible. So we are watching them being more and more ostracized by the global South, Israeli style, as you mentioned, correct. The only thing that they have is to ramp up the rhetoric and, of course, those threats with what they don't have, like manpower, capable armies, enough weapons, even if bought from the US, considering what the US will be interested in selling them, even if it's paid by overvalued euros, by the way. And of course, threats against Russia, Iran, and on and off China nonstop. That's everything that they had. And of course, even worse, pure theft. Today is Wednesday, right, Nima? Guess what's going to be decided tomorrow in Brussels? If they're actually going to dare to steal, literally steal, at least 140 billion euros of Russian assets and find some legal maneuvering to transfer their own terminology. These funds for use their own terminology by those Kiev gangsters. Well, if that happens, bye-bye to anybody investing in the European Union, and bye-bye to any credibility of the euro and the European Union at large. So let's see what's going to happen tomorrow in Brussels. Tomorrow is a very, very important landmark. Let's see. There are some people, there are some economists around Europe who are saying, look, you better think 10 times before you do that, because then we are all screwed. So let's see. But don't forget, this is not a geoeconomic or geopolitical decision. It's a narrow political decision by these absolutely disgusting so-called leaders of the European Union, which have more power than the nation states that compose the European Union. So the situation is really, really bleak. And there's no way out, Nima. It's going to get worse and worse and worse.
Pepe, how do you see the other side? How do you see the side of these Atlanticists in Iran and Russia? What is their position as time goes by?
It depends on the issue, Nima. That's a very complex discussion. For instance, I was reading today something that was published in a very serious portal in English, Russian, German as well, debunking some people who are posing as Russian experts who seem to know exactly what goes on in the real corridors of power in Russia. The analysis is essentially correct because nobody, especially us, foreign analysts, reporters, correspondents, etc., even spending a lot of time in Russia, we really don't know. Nobody really knows. And in my personal case, that in this past 3 years, I spent a lot of time in Russia and I made some very good connections and I was received with open arms because I was one of the very few foreigners who actually decided to actually go to Russia and spend a lot of time in Russia and talk to everybody and understand the Russian point of view on several levels. Our access and the information that we have access to has a limit. And obviously, the best we can aspire to is to have people who work closely with the intel apparatus, with the agencies, or worked before, or have very good contacts, or even think tanks. But there's a limit. The ones who really know what's really going on are Vladimir Putin and the Security Council. Nobody else. And of course, Gerasimov. Gerasimov has to know for obvious reasons, Minister of Defense. And that's it. There's a lot of stuff that not even the Minister of Foreign Relations in Russia knows. So this is so you cannot pose as a Russian expert anywhere, wherever you come from, and it doesn't matter how much time you spend over there. You're always learning. From my point of view, I keep myself in Russia in the position of a non-stop full-time student. I'm always learning, and I'm always learning about, especially subtleties of the Russian way of thinking and making decisions and planning long term. For instance, you cannot but admire how they are planning the development of their Far East, of Siberia and the Russian Far East. This is something that you see every year in the Vladivostok forums, essentially. So you learn to understand and to praise Russian long-term planning, Chinese style. In the case of the SMO, it's much more complicated because there is a spectrum of opinions about how the SMO should be conducted. And if you go to a very nice dinner in Moscow and you have 4 or 5 people on the table, they will all have divergent analysis of how the SMO was organized and should proceed from now on. And these are very well informed, educated, and connected people, you know. So there's no monopoly of how Putin is going to end the SMO. Okay, look, it's on public record from Putin and from everybody else at the top of the government. Demilitarization means demilitarization of Ukraine and NATO. So as soon as Putin and the Security Council are sure that they did 90% of the job, approaching 100%, that's it. From their point of view, that will be the end of the SMO. It's going to take a long time. And denazification, it's a matter of generations. You cannot then denazify Ukraine in 1 or 2 years. It will take 2 generations at least. You know, that's a long-term process. So, you know, and now when they are facing, once again, Narcissus drowning in his own swamp every day, infatuated with his image and changing his point of view every 5 seconds or one news cycle to another. I'm going to organize a meeting with Putin in Hungary. I already called Orban. Everything is going to be all right. And then a few days later, I don't want to waste my time. How can you trust a political leader like this? You know, there's no strategy. There's nothing. It's just this non-stop circus that monopolizes the news cycle. Non-stop monopolizes our attention, independent analysts, non-stop. And nobody can make sense of it because there is no sense in it. Because nobody else makes decisions in Washington, D.C. It's only the big Narcissus. It's only the circus ringmaster. And everybody has to, yes, master. He qualified himself as ruler of the world, the king of whatever. And it's not in jest. He actually believes that he's the king of the world. This is not a joke. In his mind, he is the king of the world. He decides everything. And he is entitled to change his mind all the time because, after all, he's the president of the most important power in the history of humanity. How can you possibly have? It's hard to, of course, considering what is leaked from both sides when Putin and Trump talk on the phone. What is really leaked is, I would say, 10 or 15, 20% of what they actually discuss. I can imagine the silences in between. And I can imagine Putin trying to explain some basic lessons of history to Trump over the phone, which is something practically impossible. No, nobody can do that. Or at least some basic facts of life. Like, all right, you're going to authorize Tomahawks to launch against us. So this is how we're going to respond. Putin can say that in 30 seconds in a very understandable manner as well. And then Trump, okay, he absorbs that for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, but then half an hour later, he changes his mind. So, there's no continuity, there's no organization, there is not a real National Security Council properly advising the president, because those members are most absolute idiots. We have a real state mogul posing as a Bismarck. Come on, it's a circus. It's a circus. So once again, you have to praise Russian patience, Putin's own patience, and the patience of the Security Council around him, which is not necessarily the patience of the FSB or the SVR. You see, the latest public appearances of Narishkin and Bortnikov, that they are really, really fed up with all that. I can imagine if Narishkin or Bortnikov were the president of the Russian Federation. We will not be where we are now. It will be infinitely more heavy metal than where we are now. But that's it, that's Putin. And then Putin is accused of, now he's going to give even more territory to Ukraine than a few months ago. No, this is a negotiation process. These idiots don't understand the Russian way of negotiating. And of course, Putin can destabilize Trump completely when he says, look, of course I want to make a deal. But to make a deal, you have to listen to my priorities. If you don't listen to my priorities, there's no deal, because it's going to be your deal. And your deal is not my deal. A deal is between both of us. Try to explain that to Trump, Nima, over the phone.
Impossible.
Impossible.
Pepe, the main issue, it seems, as they talk about it, is an immediate ceasefire, which is not acceptable for Russians.
No. Lavrov already said no way, and this is the polite response. No?
Yeah, and the key for that, I think, what you've mentioned, demilitarization and denazification. But you cannot demilitarize Ukraine without demilitarizing NATO in that region.
Exactly.
This is the key there. And
Absolutely.
what they fail to understand, in my opinion, is that China would be more than happy with that concept. Iran would be more than happy with that concept. Look at the war between Iran and Israel. You had NATO interfering in favor of Israel. If they go to Taiwan, they're going to be NATO against, China. That's
NATO as support to the US. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Support, because it's all NATO.
Yes, exactly. It's all NATO.
2 to 5% goes to the United States. It's not going to the pocket of military industrial complex of Europe. They don't have that in Europe.
They don't have anything. Well, they're trying. Leonardo and Thales, they say that they are going to, boost the non-existent, by the way, European industrial military complex. Well, these are two serious companies, at least, but they don't have what it takes to build from scratch and something from scratch. And basically, the real participants of this new Euro-wide industrial military complex would be maximum 4 nations, maybe 5. That's it. Can you imagine Estonia being part of the Latvia being
Yeah.
part of the industrial military command? That's a joke.
Yeah. And th- coming back to the main goal, which would be demilitarization of NATO, I think China, Iran, and Russia would go to, you know, as long as it takes to do that in Ukraine because it's crucial for BRICS. It's not just about Russia. It's the full. It's all
Of
about
course.
the whole global South. You know, the
Hmm.
future of BRICS, the future of other organizations in the global South, and Russia is not going to back down on that. But I don't see Donald Trump, as you mentioned, understanding the position of Russia, which is fully supported by other countries, even I would argue India, because of the case of Pakistan. And they know the threat coming from Pakistan is real and how the situation in Pakistan can be manipulated by the United States.
By the way, the Americans are manipulating those stupid Pakistani generals like that. This is an enormous problem for the SCO. So can you imagine Russia and China will have to sit down with the Pakistanis within the SCO mandate and ask, guys, get your act together. What is this story with Afghanistan? You provoked this whole thing with Afghanistan. You have to understand, you more than anybody else know the difference between the Afghan Taliban government in Kabul and the TTP, the Pakistani Taliban in the tribal areas inside Pakistan, part of Pakistan. You know the difference. It's not the same thing, it was never the same thing from the beginning. And you're falling for that once again. So these people are really, really stupid. If Imran Khan was prime minister, there will never have been this mini Afghan Pakistani war. Never, never. And the problem is this absolutely disgusting Pakistani generals. I have some of my academic friends in Pakistan. They are horrified about all that. And even for them, it's dangerous to write about it and to discuss that in public. They know these people very, very well. This is the lowest strata of Pakistani armed forces, arrivistes, opportunists, people who want to curry favor, their own, thinking about their own career or getting some favors, especially from the Americans. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. It has nothing to do with Pakistani sovereignty. So this should be a problem to be tackled by the SCO. For the moment, not much, not much. And this so-called peace agreement or beginning of a peace agreement between Pakistan and Afghanistan was not coordinated by the SCO. That's not good. That's not good at all.
Pepe, the situation in this South America, in our region here, considering the case of Venezuela, is becoming critical, in my opinion, because
Mhm.
in the United States, we have differences between Donald Trump and someone like Rand Paul. Rand Paul was
Yeah.
one of the main characters who defended Donald Trump during the Russia
Mhm.
Gate. One of the few Republicans, by the way. And today, Donald Trump is going totally against him, is going all in against him, saying that people in Kentucky should, vote him out of power. And this is the real issue, I think, politically, with the case of Thomas Massey, Rand Paul, these people who don't agree on these foreign policies of Donald Trump and his administration. On the other hand, we see the turmoil. The turmoil came from the Charlie Kirk issue, the division, you know, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens. It seems that the whole, MAGA movement is falling apart
Yeah.
because of Donald Trump's policies.
It's fissured, and the fissures are, some of them are, you cannot put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And in the case of Venezuela, it borders on the pathetic, because if you ask a guy in sub-Saharan Africa, what the hell do the Americans want from Venezuela? He'll tell you, go there and grab the oil. Everybody knows that. The whole planet knows that. And so you need the president of Colombia to say that an attack on Venezuela is an attack on Colombia, which is something that is quite something considering the preceding years of Colombia-Venezuela relations. And I hope that Lula steps out in public and says an attack on Venezuela is an attack on the whole of South America. He has to say that in public. So at least people in Washington will hear it, or Trump 2.0 people will hear it. But when you have the Secretary of State of the so-called hyperpower, that lowly Cuban-American Rubio, who doesn't understand anything about foreign policy except their forever enemies in Central and South America, Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, what do you expect? And Neocon Rubio is blah, blah, blahing Donald Trump on a daily basis. And obviously, okay, let's bomb another boat full of fishermen. They are narco traffickers. These idiots, they don't even know how narco trafficking flows from South America to the United States anymore. It has nothing to do with Colombia anymore, and less than nothing to do with Venezuela. One of the main actors is Peru. They don't know this in Washington. A lot of drugs, they go through Brazil. They don't know that in Washington. So it's a completely different story. They cannot fabricate another war on drugs on these flimsy premises, and especially sell this to even people in the United States with an IQ over room temperature. They can see this for what it is, a grab the oil operation. And simultaneous with opening a new front against Iran, supporting Israel. What kind of foreign policy is that? Okay, there is an answer. It's the non-foreign policy of Trump 2.0, which is lash out anywhere if you want it, if you can do it, even if you cannot do it, but basically tell the world we can lash out anywhere, anytime we want. Intimidate, especially the Global South. The problem is the Global South is not being intimidated, Lima. Venezuela, they're not scared to death. Iran, the last thing they are is scared to death. Countries in the Sahel, sub-Saharan Sahel region, they're not intimidated. All over here in Asia, the powerhouses in Southeast Asia here and my neighbors here, nobody's intimidated. So, so what is this for? It's just a orangutan in the middle of the jungle say, I'm the king of the jungle. Yes, it is. Because once again, it's personal. It's in his head. It's how he feels powerful. He has to show off to the whole planet that he is the king of the jungle. Is there any strategy? No. Is there any understanding of tactics? No. Is there any discussion at the highest level about these policies? No. So that's where we are, Nima. We are hostages of the king of the jungle,
Here is Pepe. Here is what Rand Paul said about this rhetoric of drugs coming out of Venezuela.
There is no fentanyl made in Venezuela. Not just a little bit, there's none being made in Venezuela. These are outboard boats that, in order for them to get to Miami, would have to stop and refuel 20 times. They're in all likely going to Trinidad and Tobago, which is an island right off of the coast of Venezuela. So there's a lot of reasons to be worried about this. But number one is the broader principle of when can you kill people indiscriminately? When you're at war. That's why when we declare war, it's supposed to be done by Congress. It's supposed to be thoughtful. It's supposed to be debated. And we're not supposed to do it willy-nilly. And then when you have war, you just kill people in the war zone. And even then there are rules of engagement. But interdicting drugs has always been a criminal activity and a criminal anti-crime sort of activity where we don't just summarily execute people. We actually present evidence and convict them.
Yeah.
Spot on. No, he nailed it. He nailed it. Very diplomatically, by the way.
And we're getting back, Pepe, to Trump 1.0, I think. And it's getting worse because he's just
Getting
killing more people, around the world. The policies are getting so much wild and unbelievably, stupid, if we put it that way. What is he seeking for? You remember during his first time he talked with Xi Jinping, the leader of North Korea. They said the reason that negotiation was failed because of Bolton and these people in the Trump administration, but there is no Bolton. There is no one in in that sort of type of personality in the Trump administration, but you still see the same outcome or even worse outcome coming out of the Trump administration. What is that? Are we going to see each whole? It seems to me all show off in coming, showing something like the peace deal they did in Egypt, and it's nothing more than that. And they see this in Russia, in Iran, in China. They see that this president is not a serious negotiator.
The problem is you have to deal with him. Everybody sees it. Every rational actor, Nima, the major powers, BRICS, SCO, and countries all across the global majority, they see it clearly. But he has hijacked, first of all, he has hijacked the news cycle completely. Every news cycle, day after day, is dominated by the king of the jungle. No exceptions. He hijacked the production of narratives completely. So every day he needs a new narrative, even if it contradicts the previous narrative. It doesn't matter because he doesn't see continuity. That's why he can change his mind about how to deal with Russia, with BRICS, with India, every day, literally. And sometimes goes back to the same initial point, time after time after time, and then it goes 180 degrees in the opposite direction. So there are some American analysts who explain that as Trump's way of destabilizing enemies or adversaries. This is ridiculous. He's basically destabilizing himself and destabilizing domestic public opinion and destabilizing the allies. For instance, Europeans are absolutely desperate because not only they have been vassalized, they don't know how to talk with the king of the jungle. First of all, because they know they won't be respected. He wouldn't even listen to them. He wouldn't even pick up their phone calls. They are treated as absolute low lives, which they are, by the way, in geopolitical terms, and also geoeconomic. If they go on with this scheme to steal Russian funds, so once again we have this. It's a vortex. It's more like a vortex, sucking everything into his own polluted swamp, where he is contemplating his image all the time and coming up with I need a new idea to, stun people everywhere. Or it's even worse when sometimes he has ideas that at least people talk about the possibility of something working. But usually it's stupid policies or observations that are frankly pathetic coming from a leader. Can you imagine that you claim that you are going to set up a meeting face-to-face with Vladimir Putin in Budapest, and you have the Prime Minister of Hungary personally involved, setting up a committee, and a few days later you said, I don't want to waste my time. This is disrespectful not only to Putin and to Orban, but to everybody, to the whole planet, in fact. A real leader doesn't say something like this. This is ridiculous. So why did you have this stupid idea in the first place? If you're not interested, if you didn't want to waste your time, stay in the bloody White House. Quiet, which he can't, because he has to be vociferating all the time. And can you imagine a president that legislates via social media posts? How beyond stupid in terms of the international relations this is. This has coined a new era. You know, the social post foreign policy era, starting now. It's completely absurd, you know. So you can imagine, Nima, rational actors on the side of the global majority, BRICS, Russia, China, even I would even put India on it. You know, their best strategy, in fact, is silence. And Russians are using a lot of silence. In fact, when they don't, they run the risk of contradicting themselves. You know, you run the risk of having Lavrov, Peskov, Ryabkov saying stuff slightly different from each other. They can't. The Russians have to stay on message. They stay on messages 99% of the time. But this destabilization is so crazy that sometimes it's obvious that they are losing their patience. Or at least, for instance, Ryabkov yesterday or today, he had to say, look, all this fake news about not going to have a summit, these are fake news. We don't know yet. The only thing we know at the moment is that we don't know if there's going to be a summit and when. It's not that the summit has been canceled. In fact, the one who's doing something to cancel the summit is the king of the jungle himself. Now, the source of fake news now is himself. So we don't know. And in terms of China, it's even more complicated because the Chinese, they already know how to deal with Trump. They don't say anything. They're very quiet. And soon they apply a Sun Tzu move that it's so absolutely fierce that even Trump doesn't know what to say. The rare earth saga. Nobody was expecting it now, and the way it came via a Ministry of Commerce directive, very polite, specific, listing everything, etc. Super professional, but nobody was expecting it. And now they're going to have to. Apparently, there are underground discussions, but don't trust anything that involves those xenophobes that pose as Trump advisors on China. They don't know literally anything about China. So the Chinese keep doing what they're doing, which is fascinating. It's something that I was privileged enough last month to see what China did to develop Xinjiang in front of me every day. And it's something, it's impossible to explain this to the West. Between us, of course, it's possible. But to explain this to political leaderships in all across the Atlantic East-West is absolutely impossible. And even if they went there, they wouldn't understand. You know. And of course, you see these instances of Chinese technological domination in every field, which are absolutely staggering, including programs that are completely unknown in the West and even in many parts of Asia. And it's all getting there. And, you know, involving the top Chinese universities, which are reaching a level over and over and over the Ivy League and Oxbridge in England, way beyond these two clusters. You know, you cannot have this discussion in the West. Forget it. You know. So the Chinese are masters of course, silence, circumspection, discretion. They don't have to boast about anything. And when you see something happening, it's already happening. It's the absolute opposite of the king of the jungle, which is boasting all the time that things are happening and will happen, and they don't, and they won't. There you go. That's the major difference between a 5,000-year-old superpower most of its life and a superpower that had his moment for maybe 70 years in history, which in historical terms is a speck in the sand. That's it.
Pepe, how do you bring the factor of Donald Trump's age to the whole case? And is that influencing his sort of dominance on his administration?
This is the rumor in Washington, right, Nima? But we don't know uh, if these sources are very, very serious or if this is just spin or fabrication of narrative. Apparently, uh, he's not very, very well. So, and it's interesting because some of these leaks came from people who have daily interactions with him. And the most telling, which from an American point of view and from an American construction of narrative point of view, it's very, very, very important. He's not capable of reading the room and controlling the room anymore. And he was always a master of both, not anymore. So if this is true, then it's really, really serious. Because within the next, 2 years, 2.5 years, we can come to the situation where we're going to have the Palantir guy as president of the United States. Can you imagine? If you think it's bad now, just wait.
I think the reason of the question that I asked you is leadership in Russia, China, or even Iran. They're thinking, who are they talking with?
Exactly.
Who's
Exactly.
there? Who's there? Whose policy are implemented in the United States? And that's a huge concern because every time Donald Trump comes out of a phone call with Vladimir Putin, says everything positive, everything is going well, and in a couple of hours, you see he changes his mind toward the whole conflict. This is a real issue when you talk with foreign leaders.
Yes, Dima, coming back to what we were discussing a few minutes ago. The only thing they know is that they're dealing with the king of the jungle. So, they have to use a mixture of cunning, I would say silence and cunning. By the way, these are two of the famous motto of James Joyce, one of the greatest writers of the 20th century. For me, he's among the top two of the 20th. His motto was silence, exile, and cunning. Exile because basically he lived most of the time exiled from Ireland. But silence and cunning, straight to the point. The Russians are masters of both silence and cunning. And the Chinese are masters of silence and cunning. The Persians can be very, very good on cunning. They should apply silence more. You don't need an RGC general speaking every day in public. No, you don't need that. Or if you attack, you're going to pay a price. No, you don't need to say that. The Persians are much, much better when they are discreet and apply cunning. History tells us that. So that's it. And I would say that this would apply to leaders of the global South everywhere. Don't antagonize the king of the jungle directly. You can say something once in a while in a way that will be interpreted as mocking the king of the jungle. It's much more effective. Or you don't say anything. That destabilizes the king of the jungle even more because then he'll see that he's talking to a wall, a global South wall. That will be even more interesting.
What if they do something big in Venezuela, overthrow the government in Venezuela? How is that going to influence the global South?
Nima, they cannot overthrow a country where you have 4 million militias, 5 million militias, even more, mobilized all over the place. armed forces mobilized. Everybody in Venezuela now is mobilized because they know that the country may be attacked
Is
any
that going
minute.
to be worse than Vietnam for the United
Well,
States?
there's no, if they try something, Vietnam would be, Disneyland in Hong Kong. And they know it. When I say they, once again, the 2 or 3 people in the Pentagon who have an IQ over room temperature. Not necessarily, well, the Department of State forget it, the CIA forget it. But in the Pentagon, these people, they have to know a few basic things about invading a sovereign country and the price that you have to pay for it. First of all, they don't even have what it takes to invade Venezuela. What are they going to do? Bomb Caracas? It's a joke. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And they don't have what it takes internally to organize a regime change coup. Not even with this ridiculous Nobel Peace Prize, which is one of, in terms of Nobel Peace Prizes, this one takes the cake. There's nothing more ridiculous than this one. Even the Obama Prize was less ridiculous than this one. They don't have domestic support. Not to mention the rest of South America will have to rise up, because this would be an attack against South America and against Latin America as a whole. It's a diversionist tactic, and we have no idea. Obviously, this was not thought through. It came out of the King of the Jungle's mind one night watching Fox News. There is no sequel to that, obviously, assuming it will happen. This was not gamed as far as we know. And obviously, it's a diversionist tactic to change the subject from some of the things that really matter. And I would say the top 2 things that really matter. That the Empire of Chaos already lost the proxy war against Russia in Ukraine, and there's no way out. Number 1. Number 2, which is even more serious in several aspects. The Empire of Chaos is losing the technological war against China, and soon we're going to reach a point of no return. Can you imagine, Nima, having to deal with these 2 facts in front of you? Out of the question. Okay, let's bomb Venezuela. We'll change the narrative. Once again, the same definition applies. China is specialized in the production of actual goods, consumable goods, all across the world. The United States is specialized in the production of narratives. This is the short version. And they have a president that is, the only thing that he does is to fabricate narratives. There you go.
Pepe, before wrapping up this session, I want to ask you a question about China, because you've been
Yes.
to China recently. You compare China to the United States. Where do you see China in 10 years?
Wow. I'll give you a personal example. The last time I went to Urumqi, the capital of Xinjiang, was a little over 10 years ago. So I arrived now. I arrived by train in the southern train station in Urumqi. And I said, oh, cool, I am in downtown. I can even walk to my place. Then I go out and look around and said, is this the real downtown? And then a taxi driver explains to me, no, there's another downtown, much bigger, but you have to take a super highway to get there. This is a very simple example to show you how China develops in 10 years.
Yeah.
For instance, Shanghai. I remember Shanghai, and I shot at the time. I have images. I had a Sony Mini DV camera at the time, late 90s. I was one of the first guests of the Grand Hyatt Hotel in the Jingmao Tower in Pudong. They were in a soft opening. I was in Hong Kong, and they told me, look, we're opening a new hotel in Shanghai. So I went there, and around me, there was only the Oriental Pearl TV Tower and maybe 2 other smaller towers. And Everything around me was a gigantic building site. They were building literally everything in Pudong from scratch, Nima. So this was 25 years ago. You come back today, which 25 years ago is not much, and you have a full business district in Pudong with zillions of towers, impeccable circulation, everything state of the art, modern, unimaginably efficient from a Western point of view. And they built all that not in 25 years. They built that in maximum 15. It was already ready 10 years ago. Everything. You know. Or another simple example. You go to a Huawei shop and you ask the guy to do a demonstration of their Huawei trifold smartphone, which is the top smartphone on the planet. Okay, it's expensive. It costs $3,000, but it's worth every cent. You know, it's absolutely unbelievable. It turns himself into an iPad, among other things. You know, satellite, you name it. It's completely absurd. In the Huawei Research Center in Shenzhen, I remember well. The year was 2016. I visited this research center 9 years ago. They already had it. It was already there, Nima. All these state-of-the-art models that we're seeing now in shops, in China, of course. You cannot use them in the West because they use the Harmony S system, only for China. 10 years ago, they already have everything. And okay, to continue with examples, probably the most radical example of them all. 10 years ago, Nima, US 10 years ago, they launched the Made in China 2025 initiative program. So their idea was, in 10 years, we're gonna need to be the top or the top 2 or maximum top 3 leaders in these 10 high-tech sectors. Nowadays, they are leaders in practically 8. There are only 2 left, and they will be leaders probably in the next 2 or 3 years. Well, I would say 3 years max. One of them is semiconductor production, which they are cracking the barrier, and soon they won't need NVIDIA, they won't need the Dutch, they won't need Samsung, they won't need anybody. Everything will be made in China. They do that in 10 years, Nima. What's the mystery? Very simple. 5-year plans, subsequent 5-year plans, and they are examined in excruciating detail as they go on, and it's all about meritocracy. Meritocrats advance, they have rewards, etc. The other ones stay along the way. What is being decided this week, Nima, as we speak in Beijing? Guess what? The next 5-year plan. They are discussing it this year. We're going to have, by the end of this week, maybe by Friday, we're going to have at least an idea of what they discussed and some of the targets. For the moment, it's discussion. 4 days of non-stop discussion, right? And, of course, we know that they already have planned most of the geoeconomic aspects up to 2035. So this is in theory, they are discussing the 5-year plan from 2025 to 2030, but what they had not planned already, including 2030, 2035. They had 3 subsequent plans already a few years ago. Everything, the basic lines of development are already planned. They have to get into the nitty-gritty details. This is what they're discussing this week in Beijing, the details of this next 5-year plan. And that explains, Nima, when you go, for instance, my dream, cross the Taklamakan Desert. I had this dream since I read those books by European adventurers. Some of them almost died trying to cross the Taklamakan, like the Swedish Sven Hedin. So the experience in itself is so mind-boggling, but it took me days to process it. We crossed from the Northern Silk Road to the Southern Silk Road in one of the highways. There are 4 now. It's not only one, there are 4. 450 kilometers, more or less. So you have a state-of-the-art highway. You have the protection on both sides of the highway using reeds, what the Chinese call the Chinese magic cube. So you have these reeds side by side, and obviously that prevents the sands from, overtaking those sand dunes and invading the highway. And then on both sides of the road, same thing, you have an extra green fence protection. And the sand dunes are very, very far away. Okay, so this is crossing the highway. When you enter the highway on one side and when you exit on the other side, you see the famous green belt, which is basically encircling the whole Taklamakan desert. 3,500 kilometers of green belts with very, very special plants that they selected the plants, minutiously. Well, we have to plant these ones, this formation here, blah, 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 this one after the other, blah, blah, blah. What can you say about that, Nima? Central planning and fulfilling the targets on time and even before time. Okay, they finished the green belt this year. It was supposed to finish by 2025. So they finished on time on top of it. There you go. So this was probably, I left for the end of our conversation, the most striking example of what central planning and a very efficient, centrally controlled bureaucracy can do in terms of sustainable development and respecting the environment at the same time. So sandstorms around the Taklamakan were always a huge problem for oases. The story of the Silk Road in Xinjiang is basically the Taklamakan Desert in the middle, horrible sandstorms all the time, and the oases on both margins, in the north and the south. How to protect these oases? Simple. We cross the Taklamakan and we build the green belt around it. There you go. This is what is called sustainable development, Nima. But of course, guided by a competent central administration.
I think was amazing to hear that Beijing was the most air polluted city in the world in 2014.
Yes.
And
I
today
remember
it's among the cleanest.
I remember, for instance, okay, let me say 2010. Yeah, 15 years ago, I spent the winter in Beijing. I was doing research in Beijing in 2009, 2010. I was in a tower in a new business district. Every morning, Nima, I couldn't see the other towers because of the pollution. And there was an amount of soot like this every day, even inside the apartment. This disappeared completely. I was in Beijing before going to the west, to Xinjiang. Everything is clear. Clear skies, clear rivers, clear lakes, clear ponds, everything. No pollution. There you go.
It's just amazing, I think.
It is. It is. So and what they say, look, it's not that you have to copy our model, all of you in the global south, but look at what we did and it worked. And then you can use it in your countries, in your nations. That's it. There's so much to learn from these Chinese lessons and what the Chinese learn while doing it.
Yeah.
But it is staggering. But the width, the spread, the scope, and it's all over China. it's absolutely extra. I remember when Shenzhen was basically a hellhole. You had a, you know, was not even a paved road to get to Shenzhen from the border with the new territories in Hong Kong. Nowadays, it's the #1 research center in China, on the level with Beijing, Tianjin, and around Shanghai. They did this in 30 years. It's nothing. 30 years is nothing.
Nothing. Yeah,
Yeah.
simply nothing. Yeah. Muito obrigado, Pepe. Grande
Obrigado a
prazer.
você, querido. Um enorme
Muito
prazer conversar com você. Always an enormous pleasure.
Eu te vejo.
Okay, yes, te vejo. Greetings
Muito
from
obrigado.
Southeast Asia. Boa noite do Sudeste da Ásia, para o Nima e para todos vocês. For all of you, greetings from Southeast Asia, and the ASEAN Summit starts here this weekend.
Yeah, great. That would be great. Yeah, yeah. We're gonna have a lot of news about that. Obrigado, Pepe.
My pleasure. Cheers. Bye.
Bye bye.